Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. We are going to be tackling a topic that is pretty relevant to a lot of people, and that is student dropout and how machine learning is now being used to predict it. And we've got some pretty fascinating source material, research papers, data visualizations, and even a full video presentation by data scientist Alia Friedman, who has actually built a model to do just that.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see how data science can be applied to such a human issue. It's the source material really drives home the impact of student dropout. It's not just numbers; it's real lives and lost potential.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a lot more common than I think people would realize. In the UK alone, last year, over 40,000 students dropped out. And Leah didn't just analyze the problem. She went and built a predictive model from a data set of over 4,000 students.
Yeah, and the accuracy is really remarkable. It correctly classified 89% of the students in the data set. That's almost 9 out of 10. And that's where this confusion matrix comes in. It's a visual representation of the model's performance, showing how many students were correctly categorized as likely to drop out or stay enrolled.
Okay, I'll admit that when I first looked at the confusion matrix, it was a little dense, but once you understand how to read it, it really does highlight the model's power. Could you walk us through it a little?
Sure. So imagine a table divided into 4 squares. So one axis represents the actual outcome, whether a student dropped out or not, and the other axis shows the model's prediction. So the top left square shows the true positives, the students the model correctly identified as likely to drop out. There were 505 of those. The bottom right square shows the true negatives, so those correctly predicted to stay. And then you have the false positives and false negatives, which are the incorrect predictions.
So a small number were misclassified, but the vast majority were predicted accurately. So the 89% accuracy really is pretty impressive, especially when you consider the complexity of the issue. The source material also mentions something called an AUC-ROC score of 0.95. For those of us who aren't data scientists, what does it actually tell us?
Okay, think of it as like a skill rating for the model. So essentially measures how well the model separates those likely to drop out from those who are likely to stay, and a score of 0.95 is very high. It suggests that this model is doing a really good job.
So we're talking about a pretty powerful tool here, but the real question is, how do we actually use these predictions to make a difference?
Well, that's where Alia's work gets really exciting. She took the output of her model and created a very user-friendly dashboard. So this dashboard actually assigns each student a risk score, allowing administrators to quickly see who might need extra support.
And it's not just about identifying those at-risk students. Right? The dashboard also visualizes the key factors contributing to that risk. And that means that educators can get a much deeper understanding of each student's individual situation.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of just seeing a number, educators can see the factors that are influencing a student's risk, which allows for more targeted interventions. This could be anything from academic support to financial aid counseling.
Now, to build this model, Alia used some pretty sophisticated techniques. I'm curious about how she went about tackling this challenge of creating such an accurate predictor.
Well, she used a few key approaches. One was S-Mode-E, which helps to address the imbalances in the data. So imagine you're trying to teach a computer to recognize cats and dogs, but you only have a few pictures of cats. S-Mode-E is kind of like creating synthetic copies of those cat pictures so that the computer has a more balanced view.
Oh, I like that analogy. So
Yeah.
By balancing the data, she ensures that the model isn't biased towards one outcome or the other. What about the actual prediction algorithm? What technique did she use?
She opted for a gradient boosting classifier. Think of it like this. Instead of relying on a single expert, you're consulting a panel of experts, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. And gradient boosting kind of combines the predictions of these individual weak models to create a stronger, more accurate overall prediction.
So it's like a team effort, with each model contributing its expertise to the final prediction. Sounds incredibly powerful, but also quite complex. Well, how do you even begin to optimize something like that?
Well, Alia used a technique called grid search CV, which essentially tests out different combinations of settings for the model to find the best performing one. Imagine trying on different outfits to find the perfect look. It's essentially what grid search CV does for machine learning models.
Okay, so we have this highly accurate model built using some cutting-edge techniques, and it's all neatly packaged in a user-friendly dashboard. And this is where things start to get really interesting. Let's dive into what the model actually reveals about the factors influencing dropout.
So one of the most insightful tools that Alia created is this SHAP values visualization, which shows which features have the biggest impact on the model's predictions.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I first saw that visualization, it's pretty intimidating with all those dots and lines, but once I understood what it was showing, it really clicked.
Yeah, it's actually quite intuitive once you get the hang of it. So imagine each dot represents a student, and the color of the dot tells us whether a factor increased or decreased their risk of dropping out.
And the position of the dot on the horizontal axis shows the strength of that impact.
Yeah.
So the further a dot is to the right, the more that factor increased the student's risk of dropping out and vice versa.
Exactly. Let's look at a specific example. You'll notice that having a high number of approved curricular units in the second semester appears to significantly reduce the risk of dropping out. On the other hand, a low number of credited units in the first semester seems to increase that risk.
That makes sense. It's almost like building momentum.
Yeah.
A strong start sets you up for success, while struggling early on can make it harder to catch up.
Precisely. And what's so fascinating is that the visualization also highlights the influence of factors beyond academics. For example, tuition fees and scholarship status play a significant role, reminding us of the financial pressures that many students are facing.
It really underscores how intertwined these factors are. It's not just about academic performance, it's about the whole student experience.
Absolutely. And if we look even further, we see that familial factors also have a notable impact. For instance, the father's occupation and qualification level, as well as the mother's occupation, show up as influential factors.
That's really interesting. It suggests that a student's background and family circumstances can play a pretty significant role in their educational journey.
Yeah, it's a reminder that students don't exist in isolation. Their personal lives, their support systems, their financial realities, all of these things can influence their likelihood of success.
So we have this incredible wealth of information about the factors influencing dropout, all thanks to Alia's model and dashboard. But I'm curious, how do these individual risk scores actually translate into real-world action? What happens when a student is flagged as being at high risk?
Well, that's where this distribution of dropout risk scores comes in. It shows us the frequency of different risk score ranges within the student population. So essentially, it's a visual representation of how many students fall into each risk category.
So we can see that the majority of students have a relatively low risk of dropping out, while a smaller percentage are at a much higher risk.
Exactly. And this allows administrators to prioritize interventions based on the level of risk. Students with the score above a certain threshold might receive personalized outreach, academic advising, or even financial assistance.
That's like a triage system, directing resources to those who need them most.
This brings up another intriguing question.
I'm curious about how the model accounts for the differences between students from different backgrounds. Does it take into account things like socioeconomic status or first-generation college status? After all, those can significantly influence a student's experience.
That's an excellent question, and it highlights the importance of understanding how the model works and what data it's using. It's crucial to make sure that the model isn't inadvertently perpetuating existing inequalities.
Yeah, it's almost like this balancing act, leveraging the power of data while also making sure that we're using it responsibly and ethically. I think this is a perfect segue into the next part of our discussion.
Yeah, it is. It's a complex landscape for sure. Alia's model provides some really valuable insights, but we have to remember it is just a tool. And like any tool, it can be used in many different ways.
This makes sense. We need to be mindful of the potential pitfalls while still harnessing the power of these predictions.
Exactly. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about the practical side of things. What actions can institutions actually take based on these insights? If we think back to the factors we discussed, academic performance, financial pressures, even familial influences, what are some tangible steps that could be taken to make a difference?
Okay, let's get practical. The dashboard highlights students who might be at risk.
Yeah.
But what happens next? How do we translate those risk scores into meaningful support?
Well, one obvious area is financial aid. We saw how tuition fees and scholarship status play such a significant role. Institutions could explore, expanding scholarship programs or creating more flexible payment options to kind of ease that financial burden on students.
Yeah, that seems crucial, especially with so many students struggling with the cost of education these days. It's not just about getting them in the door. It's about supporting them through the whole journey.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then there's the academic side of things. Remember how a strong start in those early semesters seems to be a key predictor of success? Well, institutions could implement early intervention programs offering, additional academic support for students who are struggling in their first year.
Yeah, I'm picturing things like peer tutoring, study skills, workshops, maybe even supplemental instruction sessions that are tailored to specific courses. It's all about creating a safety net, so students don't feel like they're floundering out there on their own.
Exactly. And the beauty of this model is that it allows for personalized support. So if the dashboard flags a student as being at risk because of low engagement in a particular course, the institution could proactively reach out with targeted resources or connect them with a peer mentor who excelled in that same course.
It's a tailored approach.
Yeah.
Meeting students where they are and providing support that's specific to their needs. That's really powerful. But what about those factors outside of academics? We talked about the influence of family background.
Mm-hmm.
How do institutions address those kinds of broader influences?
That's a great point, and it highlights the need for a holistic approach. Institutions need to recognize that students' lives extend beyond the classroom, their personal experiences, their family dynamics, their socioeconomic backgrounds. All of these things can play a role in their academic journey.
So it's not just about academic support, it's about creating a culture of understanding and support that really encompasses the whole student experience.
Precisely. It could involve, providing resources and guidance for students facing financial hardship, family challenges, or mental health concerns. It's about recognizing that success isn't just about grades. It's about well-being and creating an environment where students feel supported on multiple levels.
And it's not just about providing those resources. It's also about fostering a sense of belonging and community. When students feel connected to their peers and to the institution, they're more likely to persist even when faced with challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Peer-to-peer support programs, social events, even something as simple as a welcoming and inclusive campus environment, these can all contribute to a student's sense of belonging.
It sounds like a multi-pronged approach is needed, combining data-driven insights with a human-centered focus on student support. It's like weaving together a tapestry of support, drawing on multiple threads to create this strong and resilient fabric.
That's a wonderful analogy. The model provides the framework, the data points, but it's up to the educators to bring those insights to life, to weave those threads together and create a learning environment that empowers all students to succeed.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. We've explored the incredible potential of machine learning to predict student dropout, delved into that complex web of factors that contribute to this issue, and started to imagine what a more supportive and inclusive learning environment could look like.
It's been a fascinating journey, and I think what's most exciting is the potential for positive change. This technology has the power to really transform how we approach student support, moving from a reactive model to a proactive one.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's about empowering educators, supporting students, and creating a future where dropping out is no longer the reality for so many individuals.
And remember, the solutions aren't limited to what we've discussed today. This is an ongoing conversation, and we need to continue exploring innovative strategies and approaches to really address this complex challenge.
That's a great point. We've really only scratched the surface here. There's so much more to learn, so much more to discuss, and so much more we can do to create that positive change.
Yeah, it really does feel like we've uncovered a huge amount of really interesting insights today, and it's exciting to think about how these discoveries can be used to shape the future of education.
Yeah, and that's what I love about these deep dives. They spark our curiosity and get us thinking in different ways, but they also leave us with a lot more questions. More avenues to explore. Absolutely. We've laid the groundwork, explored the possibilities, but now it's time to take it a step further. So I have a thought-provoking question for you and for all of our listeners out there. Given everything we've talked about today, all those factors that influence dropout, from academic struggles to financial pressures to even family background, what other strategies can we come up with to create a truly supportive and inclusive learning environment? What innovative solutions are out there that maybe we haven't even thought of yet?
That's such a great question, and it really does encourage us to think outside the box, to consider those maybe unconventional approaches that could really revolutionize how we support students.
But we've been given this really incredible toolkit, Alia's model, the dashboard, all of these insights into the student experience, and now it's up to us to use those tools to build something really special.
And I think it's important to remember that the solutions might not always come from the top down. Sometimes the most impactful ideas come from the people who are closest to the challenges. The students themselves, the educators on the front lines.
Such a good point. We need to listen to those voices, empower students and educators to be a part of the solution. It's about creating a collaborative environment where everyone feels invested in student success.
Yeah. And maybe it's about shifting our mindset altogether instead of focusing solely on preventing dropouts. What if we focused on fostering a love of learning, nurturing that sense of belonging, and creating an educational experience that truly engages and empowers students?
That's a beautiful way to frame it. It's about going beyond simply keeping students in school and instead inspiring them to thrive, to really reach their full potential.
Yeah, it's like that quote by Sir Ken Robinson, education isn't about filling buckets, it's about lighting fires.
Yeah.
We need to figure out how to ignite that passion for learning to create an environment where students feel supported, challenged, and really inspired to grow.
I love that. And this deep dive has definitely lit a fire under me. It's given me so much to think about, so many ideas to explore, and honestly, a renewed sense of hope for the future of education.
Me too, and I really hope it sparks something in our listeners as well. Maybe it's an idea for a new program, a different approach to mentoring, or even just a deeper awareness of the challenges that students are facing. Whatever it is. I hope it inspires you to take action, to do some more exploring, and to ultimately contribute to creating a more equitable and supportive learning environment for everyone.
So well said. Before we wrap up, I want to encourage all of our listeners to take some time to dive into those source materials that we mentioned. There is a wealth of information in those research papers and those data visualizations in Alia's presentation that we just couldn't cover today.
Yeah, you'll find some really fascinating details about the inner workings of the model, how the dashboard functions, and all the nuances of the data. It's a treasure trove of insights just waiting to be uncovered.
So take the plunge. Explore those resources, and who knows, you might be the one to come up with the next groundbreaking solution to this challenge of student dropout.
That's what we hope for with each of these deep dives, to spark new ideas and to really foster that spirit of innovation and to empower all of you to be a part of creating positive change.
Thanks for joining us today for this deep dive into the world of predicting student dropouts. It's been a truly enlightening journey, and we can't wait to see what amazing things you all will do with the knowledge you've gained. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.